at that point because it nullified me as a person. My identity, which had been carefully groomed under my grandparents' watchful eye, and forever creates what seems to be a curious alteration of consciousness, dissociative period earmarking the conflict between James Christensen, who I would later learn would be a straw man, and myself. So it's a blow equal to the initial rape trauma, which was like an axe or a wedge placed between a log and a sledgehammer driving this wedge down through the tender wooden fibers of my psyche. So this is what is another a black eye, blackout period. It's interesting that the alteration continues for some time, approximately, I would gauge 5 more years, in which my splintered identity of Craig Christensen continues on until phased out. And the alter takes complete possession of my life, really from the pages of that yearbook on that date, so that we see that over a 4-year period, hovering between recovery and denigration, it goes to denigration. Then there's a period between Thursday, May 27th, 1971, in which this error, this glaring error, this ratified error, this legal error, takes root in my life through the straw man, through the legal fiction, and creates and enhances this alteration between myself and this fictitious person. During this time, there's a deep, I would call it coma-esque dissociation stealing over my system, shutting down at least half of my brain. Major portions of my brain which identified me as me. And this injured, altered person develops and culminates again on May the 27th, 2005 CE, where I pop back in. Now from Sabbath Eve, Friday night, calendar-wise, on May the 27th, 2005 CE, common era, to the present time, I have had little problems. I've had fewer problems in affecting repair, coming back to myself, so that the long-standing problem is the error between James Christensen, the straw man, and myself. This was an honest-to-gosh, conscious alter. This alter took place, this alteration took place on the night of the graphic rape trauma, through that period, and phases out after. May the 27th, Friday night, calendar-wise, 2005 CE. On that particular night, when I phased back in, I actually began to regain physicality. I came back as me who had just been immediately raped with a 38-year delay, sensations in my body, and astonishment at the aging process. To the present hour, where I continue to battle for my own identity and my own life and my own self. So that I want to briefly cover the phase between, and I'm going to do it specifically, not from the moment of rape trauma that's been established, but from the moment of shock assault on my identity, which begins May the 27th, 1971, on a Friday afternoon, in which the shock to the system of being switched from Craig Christensen to James Christensen occurs. And again, over a period of time, about 5 years, it took that long to shut me down completely and eradicate any trace of me. So then, I want to draw our attention back to Friday night, and I'm using Gregorian language, May the 27th, 2005 CE, when I came back to myself gasping that James had taken my place. James was gasping. Oh my God, Craig was just here. So the alteration was recognizing the reintroduction of myself as a rape trauma victim. I have carefully gone over my memories, and this other alteration just completely blocked out the rape trauma altogether and lived as if it had not occurred, with the tremendous effects upon my life and the gyrations, the disconfigurations, and so forth, so that this alteration phased out beginning that night at 2005 CE. I found myself essentially the same person, greatly traumatized, greatly shaken, as I would have been on that night, June the 9th, 1967, a Friday night in which the assault occurred. This was of such a graphic nature that what occurred then during this blackout dissociation state was a number of what one would expect events in the life of a man between high school and, it would have been suicide had I not stepped in. A range that covers religious dissociation, religious conflict. It also covers functionality conflicts. There were no role models for such that I could take grasp on in childhood, and culminates in just practically a near complete disability. Had I not popped back in, it would have just been complete dysfunctionality. So that for a period of over 11 years, I have retaken my life back. And this is for me to understand that between the time of these two major black eyes or blackouts, the first being the assault trauma, the second being the assault trauma upon my very identity at age 18, paved the life for an adult alter of a rape trauma survivor, which is distinct to the rape trauma. And so that there's a history of multiple marriages, which I find difficult to identify with. I can only identify with it under the straw man. This is not to relieve me of any particular responsibility, but it is to affect mitigating circumstances that I do not believe any of these events would have taken place, A, had I had a normal childhood and been a loved child in the normal way of a two-parent home. Attending with A are the assaults upon me as a child, culminating in this assault trauma in 1967, piggybacked by more attacks by my family upon my person, more impugnments of my character, more influence from my father and mother of a huge conflicting nature to the denigration of my Christian faith and testimony, and then to the general denigration of my character and ego and so forth, that I have had to go back and look at it through trigger traumas, trigger flashes, have put me back. And I understand that now, that over that space, pardon me, of almost 38 years, this is how my life occurred. It happened to my fingerprints. The criminal charge of stealing my own child happened during that period of time. The straw man, James Christensen, was held responsible. The straw man, James Christensen, denigrated under further attacks and assaults, culminating in self-destruction after his fourth wife, Beth Christensen, leaves. She was the last hope in a carnal life of a life preserver, life jacket, lifeboat to save this life and cause it to retain some honor. So that now today, I understand what happened, how I blacked out, how my life progressed essentially without me. This leaves a blackout period. It also leaves me very much, how could I put it, very much struggling to bring some sense and honor to my life. So that today I'm essentially penniless. I'm essentially impoverished. I'm placed on disability. And my life has pretty much been ruled a failure under disability, and there seems to be no way out. There seems to be no immediate method of remediation and recovery. I understand this during this rape dissociation. What it does is it scrambles me and it removes me from the scene as much as possible by a configuration that takes place in my brain, scrambling it, and so that this is the kind of quandary I now have to work through.
Often, I'm at Grimes now. Often, when this overwhelms me, I pass out or faint. I'm feeling that way now.